Oh.
It's so nice to see everyone. So I'm delighted to welcome, a face on this Zoom call that some may recognize, but not all, is our special guest for today, John. Hello, John.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, John. Hi, John.
So John, these are some of the wonderful members of the Theatreworks Director Circle. So they are folks who are sort of in our inner circle of people who are interested, and almost everyone interested in the work of the theater, who support it in a wonderful way. And everyone who's on this call has actually been with us over the course of the summer and the fall as we've been in conversation with other theater artists. And this, for the first half of 2021, we decided to shift it a little bit. So we're actually going to follow a play a bit through its production process. So John has agreed to be here today. I'll ask him a few questions about himself so you can learn about John as a theater artist. But we're gonna, as part of following a play through its production process, start with season selection and how to put together a season. So John is also an artistic director. He's the artistic director of Creede Repertory Theater in Creede, Colorado. Show of hands, I'm just curious, and maybe for John's benefit, raise your hand if you've been to see a show at Creede, if you've been over the mountains. Well, John, okay, you have a chance now to win everyone on this call over to you and share with them why they should journey over the mountains. So so that gives you an idea for maybe when you speak a little bit about Creede, you'll have a group of folks who are all newer to your organization. I'm reading from John's bio to celebrate him a bit. So he's been with Creede Rep since 2011, and he has been an actor, director, playwright, fight director, videographer, and associate artistic director before his current position as artistic director. He received his MFA from the National Theater Conservatory, and that program was was in Denver, right, John? I'm just double checking. Great.
That's correct.
Yes, as well as his BA from Case Western Reserve University. For those of you, you may have seen John on Theatreworks stages in It's a Wonderful Life, the radio play, as well as The Liar as well, right? Featuring
Liar and
more.
The Game of Love and Chance as well.
The Game of Love and Chance. Were your wigs in The Game of Love and Chance as spectacular as your wigs in The Liar? Because having gone back through some of the production photos, the wigs in that one were particularly striking.
The Liar, that was probably my favorite wig I ever wore on stage. And now I've got my COVID hair here, so I'm starting to get to that length now. But yeah, that was the best wig I ever wore. I really enjoyed that.
Maybe later in the call, if we're feeling particularly ungenerous towards John, we can do a screen share of that wig so everyone can see it in all of its glory. So John, is there anything, so John has also been in shows sort of all around the state of Colorado, at Creede Rep, at the Lone Tree Arts Center, Arvada, productions at the Denver Center, including Othello and A Christmas Carol. So John, we're really delighted to have you here. I'm so grateful.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here and get to chat about the season selection process and more.
Yeah. Before we get into season selection, I always love to just start off hearing every artist's sort of origin story in the theater, how they came to be a person of the theater. So before we talk about season selection, would you mind sharing how theater came to be your profession and your passion?
Absolutely. So for me, I grew up in East Coast guy, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Come from a family not of artists, a family of engineers and nurses and accountants and everything that falls on whatever side of the brain that is. So I was a little bit of the black sheep in the family. But how I discovered theater, it wasn't until high school, and I was a little bit of a class clown and getting in trouble a lot, as theater kids often do. And it was, I think, ninth grade, and I had already been kicked out and moved from one English class to another for causing a bit of trouble. And the new English teacher, we were reading Macbeth and Romeo and Juliet and whatnot. And she noticed that I love to, my hand went up right away when it was who wants to read out loud, who wants to be the reader. And she was like, John, there's this thing I teach in addition to English called theater, and you should consider taking it next year. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I was a sports guy a little bit and whatnot, and it seemed so different. But I said, sure. And so when I was 16, I took my first theater class, and I just fell in love with it. And the thing I probably fell in love with most, besides just a great outlet for energy, which so many theater people have, was the ensemble that forms in a theater. And it seems to me like misfits are always drawn to the theater for some reason. And I, in my own way, was a misfit. And so I found a great group of friends, and a new level of trust forms in a show, putting a show together. And anyway, so yeah, that's when I discovered it, and I got the bug big time. My very first show there, hilariously, was a stage adaptation of Princess Bride. I played Prince Humperdinck. Every single line, I would look out to the audience and crack a smile. It was just pretty terrible, but I just absolutely fell in love with it. And then when I went to school, undergrad, I went to Case Western Reserve University. Wasn't quite sure, do I want to make this a career? And my family was scared as could be. And Case was a good BA program where there would be many backups, if I wanted to. But so I say it wasn't until college where I really dove in and read all the books and said, oh, wow, I've got a lot of ground I got to catch up on here, because I started pretty late. And so, yeah, through that undergrad experience, got a lot of experience, and was really wonderful. Moved to Los Angeles for a couple of years, so got to see what that was like. And then I knew I wanted to get to New York City, and on the way I went to the National Theater Conservatory, so I got my MFA there, and that was like a whole nother level of learning. And then spent a lot of time in New York. Yeah. So there's a little bit of how I discovered theater.
I love it. I love that you have the experience of both coasts and have now found a home in the West. I want to pick up on that because I want to ask you a little bit about Creede. And when I hear you speak about one of the things that really drew you to theater being the ensemble nature and the trust that's built among a group, to then find yourself at a repertory theater, which is a model that not everybody on this call might be familiar with, especially since it's a model that isn't what as many theaters have as used to. My impression is that there used to be more repertory theater models in this country, and that there are fewer now. So would you speak a little bit about Creede Rep and about that repertory model that you all have there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it is very unique. A lot of theaters still have repertory in their name, but aren't necessarily running in a rep format. So for us, during the heart of our season, which runs May through mid-September, we will have 7 to 9 plays that are running in rep. So they are switching out the sets, the scenic design, every single night, or between a matinee and an evening performance. And our actors are in anything from 3 to 5 plays at one time. So there's a lot going on up in your head. And yeah, it's an incredible challenge, and I just absolutely love it. It pushes, you have to be able to play in different genres of theater, everything from classics to a gritty new play, to improv comedy, which we also do. So a little bit of everything. And it's not just the actors, it's the designers as well. We'll often have a resident designer for each of our 2 theaters. We have a black box theater, which is adaptable. And then we have a large proscenium theater, which basically looks the same for all of our shows. And so we'll have designers that will do all the sets. Typically, we have a designer that'll do all the sets for the main stage and all the sets for the Ruth Humphrey Brown black box theater. And so they have to create sets that will speak to each other and be able to reuse some parts and be able to change over in 1 hour between that matinee and that evening performance. So it pushes them as well. yeah, repertory theater is, it's a blast, but by the end of the season, you're just on the floor, just like they got to push you with a mop, yeah.
I can imagine. Do you feel like all actors are secretly repertory actors? They just don't know it yet? Or do you feel like repertory acting with, as you spoke, those lightning fast shifts between styles and needing to hold so much in your head, like repertory theater acting is like a special subset of acting?
Uh, Maybe both. I think certainly my favorite actors are rep actors at heart. The actors that want that are they give me more people that want to be challenged. One of my first seasons acting in the company, I got to play Petruchio in Taming of the Shrew. Then I got to play William Shakespeare himself in this new play called William Shakespeare's Land of the Dead, which was William Shakespeare meets Walking Dead. It was a brilliant, hilarious play where his company in 1599, opening night of Henry V, is being attacked by what they think is the Black Plague, but it's a zombie apocalypse outside. It's actually very smart and well researched. But anyway, that, and then a gritty play called The Language of Trees, which was a beautiful contemporary play, and then I think I was ensemble of the musical as well. And I was like, how am I going to do all this? And so it's a real treat and it's a real privilege that you just don't get that often. You have to be okay though with some actors. You have to be okay with being on your toes every night, and you're not going to sink into a play the same way as when you're doing it 8 times a week. So you have to be okay with that. So that takes a certain kind of actor, I would say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. A certain, yes, a willingness to let things be live and be stretchy.
You bet.
In a way that
Cool.
some actors really delight in, and other folks, that sounds like their idea of a zombie apocalypse type of nightmare.
Yes, I get that too. Yeah.
I'm sure. So it sounds like when you think about putting together a season at Creede in particular, there are some unique parameters specific to the repertory model. But when you're thinking about putting together a season, or you and your team, because you might also collaborate with other folks when you're putting together a season, what's important to you?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Like, what does it boil down to? And I'll get into our process, because yes, there are multiple people involved later. But what are the most important ingredients? I think there's 3. First is passion, especially as the leader of the organization, the artistic leader. You have got to have a great passion for your final selection, because you're going to be living with that baby for a year, and you're going to talk about those plays endlessly, and you're going to be sitting in endless rehearsals and whatnot. So for different reasons, sure, but you better be thoroughly excited for different reasons, but for every piece that's going to be on that stage. The second thing is the why question. Why now? It took me a second to learn the importance of that, because some artistic directors come from directing backgrounds, administration, playwright. I primarily came from an acting background, although I do all those other things. And the acting is a beautiful thing, but often it's a little bit with the blinders on. You're looking at your character's perspective, your character's world. But in this artistic director role, you got to expand that out exponentially. And so you really do have to ask, why are we producing this play right now? And there's different answers to that, of course. Does it have a relevance right now? Does it infuse hope into the world right now, which is something we need? Does it challenge our audience and ask this deep question that they're going to go drive home afterwards and talk about for the next 2 hours of their night? Is it going to leave them rolling in the aisles? So you got to answer that why question very specifically. And then the third is more all-encompassing. It's the goals. So every season, you're going to have different goals. Be it, there's so many. We want to diversify the voices of our playwrights in this season. We want more female leads. We want, we're coming off a bad financial season and we're going to have to fill some more butts and seats, as we like to say. We need more name title recognition for this season. Oh, we want to do 2 world premieres this year. So it just depends what those goals are, and that's season specific. And no doubt that COVID has has put a whole lot of new restrictions. So then there's choosing a season in COVID world, which is a whole nother challenge, but maybe we'll get into. So anyway, those would be my top 3, Caitlin.
I love that. And I love that you specifically talk about the goals and that you're being frank with us, right? Because I think sometimes as an artistic leader who often is responsible for communicating vision, that balance of vision and storytelling along with the practical, like how many people need to sit down and enjoy this production, that both of those things are being held at the same time. So I love that you're being frank about it with us. So then what's your so knowing that you're looking for passion for things that clearly answer that question of why now, and any specific goals that you might have for a season, what is your process? How do you go about that?
Sure. Yeah. Well, our process is changing. Like it's changing like right now. Like the old CRT back in the day, I've heard stories of how literally by the November board meeting, when the artistic director was going to announce to the board of trustees, the entire staff didn't even know a single play that was in the season. So everyone in that room was learning it for the first time. And I'm sure that went really well sometimes, and sometimes it didn't go so well, who knows. But anyway, our process now at CRT is broadening a little bit. We're trying to bring in other perspectives into the reading of the plays and whatnot. But as far as process, so let's see, where does it begin? It begins with reading plays, a mountain of plays, of course. And where do we get those plays? Well, it's from my brain, from staff recommendations, from former company members. We are always open to proposals, former directors and whatnot, saying, hey, I think this would be an amazing show for CRT. And it kind of forms on the reading list. And often that list is anywhere from 50 to 100 plays, and then it starts whittling down. Other ways we whittle is, so who else reads? We have EDI, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion co-chairs among our staff members. They're reading the play with a specific eye to that. Are there issues that might come up with this play, with some of the plot points, or you have to be very intentional about this casting, or there could be a real situation here. So they help. Other staff members read. So our marketing director will read and say, how are we gonna sell this play? Is it, this is a pretty intense theme or topic of this show. How are we gonna get our musical and comedy people to take that leap onto this? So we have that conversation. Our managing director, who more than anyone knows financially where we're coming from, and so what the financial needs will be for the next year, and how a play will work or not work into that. And then just recently, this year, we started a new thing, which was that we recognize at CRT, like many theaters in the country, our staff is a predominantly white staff. And so one of our priorities this year is, as I said earlier, is to have some more diverse voices in our playwrights. And so we also recognize that we have a white staff, completely different life experience. And so we formed a reading committee from former company members, people who have been to CRT, been to Creede, from all different departments, but have different backgrounds than I have, who are also going to be reading our top contenders. And they're providing a feedback form with every single one, and we'll have discussion as well, where they really also help provide their feedback as to what they think, and will our audience love it? Will our company love it? Will it challenge them? What is the theme explored in your opinion, and et cetera? Are there any red flags we should be aware of? So we get that opinion in the mix too. There is a challenge with so many cooks in the kitchen though, too. At the end of the day, the final decision does live with myself, and I always make that very clear. And you'll never ever be able to make everyone happy, and that's something I'm always trying to come to grips with. A person who likes to please, but end of the day, you hope you have something that everyone gets excited about. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a big shift, I think, in terms of how people conceive of the role of the artistic director from, maybe one person selecting all of the work that is programmed to something that is more spread around many decision makers. And, the truth is, right, that there were often always lots of folks behind the scenes, whether the marketing person giving their opinion about how sellable, or a technical director about, how are we going to have, you have 2 scripts with live animals in them. How are we tracking live animals backstage?
Oh my gosh.
Those sorts of practical questions, I think, have always been part of the calculus. But I think what you're describing in the system that you've created at Creede, John, for having a more explicitly democratized, not only from the perspective of like a technical director hat or a marketing director hat, but from many different artistic lenses or community lenses, that feels to me like it's a little bit newer in terms of those ways of working.
Trying.
Possibly.
It's definitely new for
Yeah.
us, and we're learning, and it's not always smooth, but we're trusting that it will make the end result even better. Yeah.
And are you feeling like, and I know that you're new to this, but are you feeling like you are able to be just as passionate about works that are sort of bubbling up through this more community-based process as you were in an older version of and you may not have enough seasons that you're working in this, but I'm wondering whether you can find the passion in projects that bubble up through other people as easily as you can find the passion in works that come to you that you have found.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't, that's luckily one thing I don't, ego wise, I don't care how the great play gets on my desk. It didn't have to be from this brain. What's important is it gets to our audience. So if it comes from a recommendation from our education director or whoever, fantastic. I'm glad it made its way there eventually. I mean, the harder part is when you're like, ooh, I think this is the one. This is the baby. And then you open up that feedback loop and you're like, oh, there are all those issues I didn't initially think about, or complexities I didn't think about. And that's okay. It still might move forward, but we just need to, we need to maybe hit the brakes a little bit and put some more thought into it. But yeah, that's part of the process. Yeah.
I love that. I have one more question for you about your sort of, this is something that I'm really interested in, and is oftentimes traditionally artistic directors are most associated with people who have risen up as directors. They don't always have to be. For example, Portland Stage Company in Portland, Maine, their artistic director of many decades is actually Anita Stewart, is actually a scenic designer, which I've always been fascinated by. You have multiple identities as an actor and a director and a playwright. And I'm interested in how your actor brain and your director brain and your playwright brain help you differently in crafting a season.
Well, sometimes the different identities help, sometimes it hurts. As an actor, yes, it definitely affects the season, because having my history with CRT, I did 5 seasons as an actor or a playwright within the company. And then at the end of that 5th season, they asked me to join as an administrator, as associate artistic director. And so then from that point on, my role has been more administrative. But from my acting time, I reaped the benefits of like having what we call a juicy track, like your acting track, getting to play very different characters in very different genres of theater. And I got a taste of how wonderful that is. And so I try very hard to provide as many actors as I can with juicy tracks. And that might mean multiple things, but also like you're the lead in the show, but then you get to be a chorus member over here, and you have to be just as lean forward for this show as you were for your lead show. And that's very important. And you're going to learn from that. So I try to balance as much as possible, provide that. As a playwright, I think it's very helpful in season selection. Because I have been through the rigors of like drilling story structure into my bones, I've learned a lot about that, and as a result, I'm pretty decent, I think, at reading a play and learning, okay, what effect it will have on an audience and how effective that desired effect will be. So that has helped. We have a new play festival. We do a new play festival where we select 2 new plays every year. So that skill very much comes in handy there with writers who are in process. These are not finished plays; they're in process. Yeah, and as a director, you're going to get to you're going to get to direct, and you're going to talk as an artistic director with all your directors who are, they're your secondary leaders, or I don't know what you would. I'm trying to think of like a ship metaphor or something. The captain and but I don't know anything about that. So I'm
First
not
mate.
First mate. Thank you.
John, is there a plane metaphor, or John or Ed? Is there a piloting metaphor?
Yeah, we got any Air Force people out there? It could help.
We do. We have several Air Force people. Co-pilots.
Co-pilots, fantastic. So they're like your co-pilots, and you've got to have full trust in those co-pilots, and you have to have a lot of tough conversations with those co-pilots. And so, anyway, having been on the other side of that conversation, it's helpful. So yeah, it all plays into it, and then yeah, you learn that there are things that none of those touch, right? Being an artistic director has their own challenges. And I think that often goes back to connection to that deep why. Why are we doing it? Being able to think from the 30,000-foot view, and also having management skills. Because boy, you gotta manage a lot of people, and it's tough. Anybody who's ever managed, it's like at least for me, it's one of the hardest things in the world. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have one more season selection question, and then I'm curious if to sort of solicit questions and conversations from the group. I'm interested in how you think, and this might be connected to the question of why now, of sort of why here. Something that I think a lot about is the relationship between the plays that are being produced on maybe a national scale at lots of other theaters around the country, and then the plays that maybe speak more specifically to a particular audience. And particular audiences can be defined in lots of different ways, but I'm also interested in a sense of place. Are there plays that you program because you think that they speak to the place of Creede?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a great question. Why here? That's what you put it, right? Yeah, it's got to be asked. You got to know your patrons, and it's got to be a factor. So for Creede, what's interesting? So a little about us. Well, I'll be seeing all of you this summer, so we can continue this conversation then. So I'm excited for that. But so we're located in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado, so the southwest corner, about 4 hours from Theatreworks. You can make it in 3 hours and 40 minutes if you have to run from one show to another, like I've done in the past. You can make it real fast. But our audience, so year-round residents, believe it or not, we only have about 415 people that live in Creede year-round. Mineral County, our county, only has about 700 people. But Creede is located at 9,000 feet, surrounded by 95% national forest. So it's very beautiful, and it's a tourist destination. So every year we get tourists from all around the Southwest, primarily though, Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, some New Mexico, and some down from the Front Range. So that's where our audience comes from. Our audience, we have a predominantly conservative audience, which is often different from some urban theaters. We have a very religious audience base, so we found that. Family, we have a lot of families because it is a tourist site. So a lot of families are coming up here. So those are things we factor in. I guess maybe it might be easiest for an example. Before COVID, we were going to do George Brandt's play called Grounded in our 2020 season. It's about a female fighter pilot who is grounded when she gets pregnant and becomes a drone pilot. And then the rest of the play explores her experience as a drone pilot and what effect it's having on her. But I won't spoil anything. We knew like that play was going to push the envelope for our audience, challenge them, but also was going to have accessibility in the door, because it's about it's about military and military life, and that matters a lot to our audience, and that's wonderful. And so we knew that setting was going to be one that they would lean forward to and be very interested in hearing. But then there are also discoveries in that play that we're going to push the mindset of some of our audience too at the same time. So yeah, Caitlin, I would say we're always thinking about that. In fact, it's one of the most challenging things, because sometimes we're like, oh, we wish we could do this play, but it just doesn't feel like the right play for our audience right now, Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it can be particularly challenging. You talked about one way in which the sort of urban or rural divide might function in terms of political views. And I also have found, not that Colorado Springs is rural, but that theaters serve communities in different ways depending on how many other theaters there are in the vicinity, right? Like when I came from Chicago, which has so many theaters, you can be a theater and be like only produce musicals written by women and be of service to the community because there are so many other theaters doing other things. Whereas as maybe one of far fewer theaters in the community, or in Creede Rep's case, the only maybe professional theater for hundreds of miles, the way in which you think about season selection and the breadth of work might be different than the narrowed focus that more densely populated areas, I think, can have in their theaters.
Yeah. I almost wish I had more of those limitations where we could really find our niche, but it's like, well, you're right. It's 200 miles to the nearest like professional theater. So it's like, well, I guess we have to do it all. We could do it all.
Good people. I would love to open this up for conversation and reflection on season selection, on putting together a season. Questions that you might have for John or me or for each other about either that process or really powerful seasons that you've experienced that have had a really wide range of stories that are being told.
I would like to know what do the actors do over the winter? Are they act other places, I hope, or have jobs? But do you have, when you select plays, do you select with your troupe in mind? And does your troupe ever change? Issues like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of CRTs, we do have an acting company, and for us, it's a company member is anybody who's worked at CRT and we would like to bring back, so that's a company member. And we've got some actors. We've got one actress, Christy Brandt, who's literally done 45 seasons of our 55 seasons. She is royalty. She's like Queen Elizabeth here. And then we have many actors that first-year actors or 5-year actors or 10-year. So what we try to do is find a mix. Ideally, about half of the company is long-term company members. Maybe 25% are those more recent company members, then 25% brand new company members to the mix. So we do, and some of our actors live here year round, but most are based in Denver or New York or LA or Chicago. Most are spread all around the country and are working at different theaters. One of our actors, Lavore Addison, who lives here year round, he's married to our education director, recently I think did the online show at Theatreworks. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. And then, sorry, the second part of the question was it, do you pick them for the act? What was the second part of the question?
Do you have your company in mind before you pick a play? So-and-so could do this or that, or
it's it's hard to separate it. So yeah, as you're reading plays, your brain is definitely thinking, ooh, this could work for this person, or this could work for that person. I always have to be thinking about the Queen, Christy Brandt. I always have to be thinking about Christy, where might she have a place? But you try to step away from that and just be like, can the play stand on its own? And then let's talk casting. but yeah, it's hard not to do both at the same time.
I see Al leaning forward. Perfect. Yes. Hello, Al.
Hello, Caitlin. It sounds, John, as if you may be blessed with a somewhat greater degree of financial stability than some theaters, and I'm just curious about that. Whether you have a particularly strong endowment or just very generous annual donors. And I'm sure as the artistic director, you get involved in that to some degree. Again, I'd be interested in knowing how you handle that side of your company.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have an endowment. We have a $1.3 million endowment. We're very fortunate to have that. Very few companies in the state do have one of those. It has served as a safety blanket 2 or so times the last 10 years when we needed it. There was a year where there was a forest fire all surrounding Creede and had a major effect. So yeah, we are very fortunate to have that. In terms of present financial position, we're lucky. Many theaters are hurting so bad right now. We were fortunate that when COVID started really peaking and becoming part of the conversation in March, year-round programming theaters had those spring shows where they paid all those expenses and the show's just about to open, and then it all just shut down. We were very fortunate in that we were about to have all of our expenses, go in late April when everyone arrives, but we had not reached that yet. We still had to make the terrible calls to our 90 company members saying you no longer have work, unfortunately, which was terrible. But CRT was not financially devastated. But with the length of this, we have had hard times. I have had to let go of one full-time staff member, one part-time staff member. But we are okay right now. The PPP loan and whatnot has been extremely helpful to CRT. Our donors have really stepped up. We are so blessed and fortunate to have a really loyal donor base. And so despite not being able to do what we normally do last summer, everyone really stepped it up. And so we're doing okay. This summer, we're figuring out what can we do. We know we're not going to make a lot of money. Maybe we could break even, but really the question is, it doesn't matter. We got to provide something, and we want to provide some hope this summer for our people. And so CRT, in a beautiful way, kind of is that beacon of cultural hope or whatever for our patrons. So we're figuring it out right now. I'm sure y'all are too, or maybe you have it all worked out. If so, Caitlin, let me know the answers.
So you'll have a live season this summer as far as you know right now?
Well, our original plan was to move this gigantic 2020 season over to 2021. And unfortunately, that won't be possible for so many reasons. The Actors Equity Association has some really strict guidelines right now, which I understand. And unfortunately, this huge season does not work within those. So what we are figuring out is what can work within that. And likely what that will be is outdoors, which is new for us. So got to learn a lot about that fast, but outdoors, something very small company, very small shows. And yeah, we have time, so our plan is to know in about a month's time internally, and then to announce what the new thing would be in April or so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's tricky, I think, for many theaters. And like full confession on the transparency, folks, I had hoped to put in a small season planning exercise, but as I confessed to John via private chat, I can't get my PowerPoint to work. So I made a PowerPoint with some season selection activities, and I can't get it to load. So we're gonna just be chatting a little bit more. I'll happily send it to anyone else so they can put their artistic director hat on in their free time and figure out what's the best pairing, what's the best new play pairing with Death of a Salesman. Happy to outsource my job to all of you in that way. But I think that blend that I'm hearing in what John is saying of theaters are so used to taking advantage of the resource of time, that if we perhaps don't have the resource of funds always, we at least have the resource of time to plan, and then the responsiveness that we have to be in this moment is challenging, because things are changing so frequently that resource of time isn't available in the same way as it has been in the past. Are you thinking, do you feel like you're still able to think in this moment of COVID about how the works that you are going to share together, how they're in conversation with each other, how they feel like a season together? Or do you feel like because there are so many other goals that you have, to use your three, that like just taking care of those goals is enough, and maybe the sense of a whole season isn't something that can be lifted up right now?
Right now, I'd say the goals and restrictions are winning out on the greater theme and exploration of a season. However, I hope that can emerge and rise up, as we get a little further. But no doubt, right now, the boxes that are being placed are sort of guiding. But
Can I
that's how
ask?
it is.
I'm going to ask, while other people are forming any questions or thoughts that they might have, I'm going to ask you a possibly inside baseball but much debated question is, does Creede Rep name their seasons in terms of having a theme? A popular move of theaters sometimes is to say, this is the season of love and anger, or this is the season of discovery. Or a theater that I worked at once, we had a theater, we called our one of our seasons the season of growing up, because all of the plays were in some way about sort of like family and young people.
Yeah.
Is Creede Rep a theater that names its seasons in such way, either internally amongst yourselves to find connections, or externally as a way of talking to your audiences?
Yeah, actually, in recent history, we have. Yeah, 2019 was Adventure. 2018 was, it may have been Belonging, but yeah, in recent history, we have when it seemed possible, I guess. Yeah.
I love it. I love that you fall in the naming camp.
Yeah.
There are some very strong anti-naming proponents.
Are you anti-namer?
I have been known to mock a name from time to time. I feel as if sometimes they can be very general,
Yeah.
but other
Yeah.
times, like Adventure, I think can really help prepare audience expectations and be delightful in that way. So I think that they can give things too.
Sort of a marketing tool. Yeah. In a way,
Also
more,
true.
Yeah.
On the other hand, Caitlin, it's my impression that you might be inclined to be much influenced by, if not naming a season, at least thinking about a season in terms of, this is the year we're really going to explore female playwrights, or this is a year in which we're going to celebrate the contributions of Black Americans to the theater.
That's a really interesting question, Al, which I feel like is kind of for me, although it's also for John. I think that there is some naming of celebrating the contributions of folks who maybe haven't been historically celebrated. I don't know whether I think of that as a way to approach a particular season, but rather as sort of a guiding principle for many seasons. Whereas I think that there are other theaters. For example, there was a year in Washington, D.C., where they specifically said that like the entire theater community as a whole was going to celebrate women's voices, and everyone was going to program at least one work by a woman playwright, hopefully during this particular period that they were calling the Women's Voices Festival. But I think that some of what you're describing, Al, falls more for me in planning along the lines of what John was talking about when I heard like our different voices represented across a season, rather than one season being entirely about female playwrights or about Black artists. But I'm sure
Hey,
that's
Lynn,
different.
this is Ed. I think
Yes, Ed.
variety is so important in a
Mhm.
season. I'd hate to get locked into a very narrow band, because I enjoy variety as a person going to the theater.
Absolutely. And I'm interested in, John, how you approach variety, because, for example, like I've often been one of my Achilles heel as a programmer is funny plays and making sure that we're programming comedies, which are delightful for people, because people do love, as Ed said, variety. And like, I know I always need to like search out the comedies because I enjoy experiencing them, but they're not where my brain goes. And I'm interested in how at a repertory theater, your audience experience that variety, because for us at Theatreworks, one might see The Game of Love and Chance up against, which is, you know, it's Marivaux, right? The Game of Love and Chance, right? So like a sparkling, witty French comedy of centuries past, and might see that up against like a very challenging new play. And in Theatreworks, we've got months in between for an audience to ride that roller coaster of variety that Ed is saying. But at Creede, someone, if you programmed that season, someone might go from an afternoon of Game of Love and Chance into an evening of, I'm like, I don't know, what's the last serious play, into an evening of The Mountaintop, which is how Theatreworks began its last season. And that might be, what is that like for either actors or audience to experience that variety in the same day?
Yeah, it's really important, Ed, to have that variety in there, you know, because we're, as a rep theater, as you were saying, Caitlin, if we call them rep weekends, if you came on Friday, you could see a different show Friday night, Saturday matinee, Saturday evening, Sunday matinee, Sunday evening. You used to saw 5 shows on a weekend and your head explodes. You know, yeah, we always, genre balance is a huge thing. We always have a musical. We always try to have a comedy. We always try to have a world premiere. We always try to have a family-centered show. And then we try to have a drama. And those might vary as far as, are they classics? Are they brand new? That might change. But and that, maybe I'm being a little too boxy because it varies outside of that. But if I had to quickly kind of say, I think it's very important, and it's what people love because they want to, you know, they want the explosion of the musical, but then they want to be crying their eyes out in that intimate drama, and then they want to have their thoughts provoked by this gritty new play, you know, and they dig it. We do have trouble sometimes getting those musical and comedy lovers to then boldly branch out to the other genres, but we're doing better. We're getting them in there, you know. Sometimes like a well-known company member might be that link pin where it's like, but you could see, you know, you could see Annie Butler doing this show right over here, you know.
Yeah, that thing that takes something that might be unfamiliar, and if it's the familiarity that's the thing, and what's the way to open that up without undermining the grittiness of the play, like still saying it is as gritty as it is.
Yeah.
But how can it not be strange and gritty?
How did Mountaintop, you said that started last season, is that right? How did that land with your audiences? Like, was it controversial, amazing, a bomb? How was it?
Well, I'm in a room full of audiences.
This could be a hot topic. I don't know.
Hot topic.
I don't know.
You know,
Michelle unmuted, so Michelle.
We had the opportunity, we saw it up at the Lake Dillon Theater as well as at Theatreworks. And, you know, we enjoyed it both places and we felt it was well received, but maybe others have other opinions.
I think a lot of people didn't understand it. I thought it was an extraordinarily rich play. I think it was about so much more than just Martin Luther King. I think it just posed an enormous life pertinent question for all of us. And I loved it.
Cool.
Going back to variety, I've watched the Denver Center Theater Company over the last 30 years, and they weren't a true repertory, but they had a group of actors that went through the season, and they had reliable actors in a variety of their seasons. In the last, 5 years or so, they have dedicated themselves to basically new plays, new authors, and to me, what they've produced is a series of TV sitcoms, which has been, terrible. In fact, we dropped our membership, 2 years ago, because it started just being, like I say, a series of TV sitcoms, and it lost the variety that had between classic plays and humor, and it was quite a change to me. And thought it was very sad for the Denver Center Theater Company because they did go away from a class of wonderfully talented actors who formed the background of the company into something that you never knew what you would expect when you walked into the theater. And that wasn't a very pleasant experience.
I know what you're talking about. I went to the NTC between 2008 and 2011. Right, I think, as the shift you're talking about was occurring. So I got to see all the Sam Gregory's, John Hutton's, Kathy Brady's. Like, I got to, worship those people. And then I definitely got to see the shift in programming and whatnot. And it's so darn complicated. Like, I understand the shift and I understand the benefits of a resident company. And CRT, believe it or not, we are right at the crossroads of that right now. And I'm fighting with everything in my might to do both, to make the roads go like this. I am trying so hard because I'm trying to keep that old guard there, who everyone has loved and seen so many different sides of, but also trying to bring those new voices in, trying to diversify that older company, it's really hard to do. So I'm trying to walk that middle ground, which if we could pull it off, it'd be really special, I think.
I think it's a balance that's needed. You don't have to be one or the other, but it's a balance in the theater is, I mentioned, variety. Variety in this part of the balancing of your, season and the plays. But you can do both, but you don't want to go totally, I don't think, over to, new authors and, sitcom type of shows and I'm one who loves the classics and I like drama. Drama to me is a big part of theater. You need something where you build in a crescendo and all of a sudden, it explodes. And that is a very important part of, a theater.
Team, you've made me so sad that my silly technology can't work, because I feel like the seasons that would be coming out of this group would have been really compelling, and that variety and variety along so many axes, the styles, the time periods, the opportunities that they provide for actors in terms of putting together a season. And John, I just want to thank you so much for being here with us, and especially for what you shared in this last section. And I love how much you're holding that complexity and saying that bringing these different strands, weaving these different strands together, it's challenging work. And so I want to thank you for the work that you're doing. And thank you for joining our group this morning. It was a delight to have you.
Thank you for inviting me,
Yeah.
really. Pleasure
Thanks.
meeting you all.
Thank you so much. I'm going to do that thing where I talk about what we're doing next time, even though John won't be with us. So John, you can plug your ears if you need to. But y'all, if you want to come back in February, Jeff Kent, actor, Shakespearean actor, director, fight choreographer, whose work you've seen on the Theatreworks stages. You saw his fight choreography in Cyrano. A few years ago, you saw his directing work with the 39 Steps. He'll be with us next week. I'll get the tech to work, so we'll actually look at a snippet of a very, very, very short play. And we'll talk about how a director begins their process, how they begin before even starting to collaborate with designers, how they work and prepare and think about plays. And then we'll all put our director's hats on. So it should be fun. Oh, Al has a thing. Yes,
Do we
Al.
have time for one more quick question for John?
Oh, John, do you have time for one more quick question?
Sure.
All right.
Thank you. You haven't said anything about what's been going on in the theater world for the last 9 months or so, attempting to fill the void with virtual performances. And I'm guessing that that may not be as pertinent for Creede Rep due to the nature of where you are in your season and what have you. But what are your thoughts about?
Yeah, we've been
trying to avoid, etc.
Sorry, what was the last part, Al?
Well, just I feel I'm mixing in some of my own personal opinion here, that there are definite pitfalls. We want to stay out there, but I've seen a lot of not so well done stuff. So just your thoughts on the subject.
Yeah, I totally understand you. The online, the videoed work will never, ever replace what live theater is all about, with the magic of it. Never even come close. So like part of our efforts, to be honest, the mindset around it has been stay relevant, stay present, stay on the radar, and keep maintaining that restricted funding. You have to sometimes use funding in various ways and make sure we're still utilizing that. and try and find artistic fulfillment where we could with those online projects. So we've done a lot of educational work. Our educational team is just phenomenal. They've put out like a little mini sitcom starring these two clowns that go around the town and do all these things. So it's been a real delight. They've had a whole season. We do a cozy corner where we read a public domain book chapter each week. We've done improv shows. It's called Boomtown usually, but now we call it Zoom Town, of course. And so doing improv with people all around the country, just in these little boxes, has been fascinating in itself. And then we've got a big project coming up in first week of March, which is our first like play, full sort of online production. It's called To the Moon by Beth Kander, who wrote Hazardous Materials in 2019. It won a Henry Award for Best New Play. But it's a docudrama play that's going to explore a very serious topic, domestic abuse. But we're right now in the throes of hiring and doing research and whatnot, and are going to dive into that. So yeah, we've been trying, like everyone else, trying to stay out there and stay fulfilled and still provide something to our people, our audience. But we know, when we're finally allowed to gather again, I think and I hope it is going to be, we're all going to need it on a deep soul level, and we're holding our breath. We cannot wait for that moment. But in the meantime, we're keeping up the fight, as I know Theatreworks is doing as well, and I applaud you for it. That's what we got to do.
And on that note, with that heart-stirring thought of the future where we can all gather physically together, thanks everyone. Thank you all so much for your continued awesome support as Director Circle members, and for being here today, a delightful bright spot on a Thursday morning. So thanks everybody so very much. Thank you again, John. Goodbye, Ed and Al,
Thanks,
Michelle
y'all.
and Jordan and Carol and Gina and Dick and Sandra and John. Bye everyone.
You, Caitlin.
Thank you.
Thank you.